The air in the mandatory annual physical assessment suite was too clean, sterile and sharp, smelling of ethanol and money. It was the smell of the Pentagon's budget laundered through private contractors, all chrome and flawless white tile that reflected the fluorescent hum like a constant low-grade headache. This wasn't a clinic. It was a museum for high-value assets. I was Sergeant Santos, E5. Technically, I was a network specialist, attached temporarily to this forward operational base, a ghost in the machine. I wore the fatigues well enough, pressed and faded, but they didn't hide the fact that I was an enlisted ghost, a non-commissioned officer dealing with problems far beyond my pay grade, or indeed my stated specialization. To the men in this room, I was furniture. To Captain Hayes, I was a poorly filed piece of paper. Hayes was the embodiment of everything I had been trained to dismantle: entitlement, rank insulation, and absolute faith in the system that created him. He was 28, fresh out of the War College with a perfect record built on war games and theory, his uniform tailored sharp enough to cut glass, his smile a flash of calculated contempt. He was overseeing my physical, a courtesy check he clearly felt was beneath him. "Santos," he said, turning the manila folder over once, unnecessarily. His voice was a dismissive baritone that tried too hard to sound authoritative. "Your file is sparse. Technical diagnostics, network resilience reports, 0 deployments outside of simulated environments." I stood perfectly still, hands clasped loosely in front of me, posture compliant but not submissive. "Sir, I'm a Grade B systems technician. My work doesn't require boots on the ground." "Exactly," he scoffed, placing the folder down with a sharp thwack that echoed in the quiet room. "And yet here you are. MAPA mandated for all personnel assigned within the forward zone, regardless of whether you handle servers or shoulder-fired rockets. Now, regulations state that any—" He paused, letting his eyes rake over my frame, lingering on the thick military-issue compression sleeve wrapped tightly around my right forearm. It was heavy grade, designed to hide tissue damage or surgical ports. I wore it for neither reason. "Regulations state we must identify all permanent alterations," he continued, leaning forward, the predatory glint in his eye growing. "Tattoos, scars, identification marks. You have this sleeve. Why?" "Chronic muscle strain, sir. Repetitive motion injury. The sleeve supports the wrist and elbow during extended work cycles." The lie was smooth, practiced. Hayes laughed, a short, sharp bark that lacked humor. "Repetitive motion. Typing? Good God, Santos. We're preparing for a potential theater escalation, and you're worried about carpal tunnel? Remove it." I felt the distant, cold spike of adrenaline. It was the feeling you get when the safety catch clicks off and the target acquisition is locked. Hayes wasn't asking for procedure. He was probing. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to strip me of the final layer of professional armor. "Sir, the attending physician recommended I keep it on during low-impact activities. I am overriding the attending physician specialist. I am your superior officer, and I am telling you to remove it. Unless," he added, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper designed for the benefit of the two silent watching medics, "you have something in there you don't want the command structure to see. Maybe a poorly inked butterfly, or perhaps something unprofessional." The silence that followed was dense, heavier than the pressure of the sleeve on my skin. I did not move quickly. Quick movements betray panic. I moved with the precise, deliberate focus of someone operating complex machinery. My eyes did not leave his. Hayes had blue eyes, the type that looked great on recruiting posters, empty of true experience. My left hand went to the cuff of the specialized black compression sleeve. The material was thick synthetic weave, almost rubberized. I found the edge, pressing my thumb into the fabric. The sound it made as I began to peel it back was the soft, tearing noise of heavy Velcro pulling apart, a sound that in this sterile room felt enormous, almost violent. I pulled it back slowly, inch by excruciating inch. The light of the room seemed to brighten over the exposed skin. My forearm, usually hidden, was revealed. It was pale, slightly scarred from old training abrasions, but otherwise unremarkable. Until the wrist. Hayes was still smirking. "See? Nothing but a little pale skin. Now if you'd just reveal the rest, we can move on with this farce." I didn't stop at the wrist. I kept peeling. The sleeve gathered into a thick black coil around my elbow, exposing the entire length of the forearm, up to the juncture of the bicep. And then, the room froze. The skin revealed was not uniform. Over the muscle and tendons of the forearm, centered right where the radial artery pulsed, was the mark. It was not a tattoo. Tattoos have ink, color, dimension. This was something else entirely. It looked like a topographical map of a small, brutal battlefield etched directly into the dermis. The skin was ridged, slightly glossy, unnaturally white in places, bordered by a deep vascular red. It had the texture of molten plastic that had been allowed to cool, puckering and twisting the surface tissue. It was a scar, but one achieved through deliberate, systematic chemical cauterization. It looked less like an injury and more like a brand applied with careful, excruciating intention. Hayes's smirk faltered. He leaned in closer, his professional detachment momentarily replaced by disgusted curiosity. "What the hell is that, Santos? Is that an old burn? Did you try to remove a tattoo yourself? That's appalling dermal damage. We need to log that immediately for reconstructive surgery referral." He reached out, his index finger intending to prod the mark, to examine the damage like a child poking roadkill with a stick. That was his second mistake. The first was disrespecting me. The second was touching the mark. I did not flinch, but the muscles underneath the scarred tissue tightened instantaneously, like steel cables drawing taut. Just as his finger made contact with the cold, raised skin of the mark, a new sound cut through the silence. Not from me, from the back of the room. Colonel Rourke, an old-school logistics officer who had been observing the assessment silently, clipboard in hand, dropped the clipboard. The plastic and paper hit the pristine white floor with a sharp, echoing clap. Rourke wasn't looking at Hayes. He was staring, aghast at my arm, specifically at the pattern of the scar. The mark itself was geometric, a complex arrangement of 3 intertwined off-center circles, bisected by a jagged vertical line. To the untrained eye, like Hayes's, it was merely a horrific scar. To someone who had served in the shadows or fought against them, it was a signature. It was the acid map. Rourke's face, usually set in the impenetrable mask of institutional indifference, paled to the color of the white tile floor. He inhaled sharply, a sound like a punctured lung. Hayes, still focused on my arm, snapped irritably at Rourke without turning around. "Rourke, pick that up, and this damage, what are we logging this under? Cosmetic deficiency or Class 3 trauma?" "Captain Hayes," Rourke whispered, the sound barely audible, yet vibrating with terror. "Don't touch her." The sheer, raw fear in the colonel's voice finally registered with Hayes. He retracted his hand immediately, turning to look at the senior officer, confused and angry at the interruption. "Colonel, what the hell is wrong with you? It's a scar." "It is not a scar, Captain," Rourke interrupted, his voice now ragged, his eyes fixed on the map on my arm. "That is the signature of Unit 88, the Harvesters." Hayes scoffed. "The Harvesters? Sir, that's a legend. A ghost story they tell Marines in the field to stop them from running off base. An unsanctioned black unit that died out 10 years ago in the Balkans. They were executioners, Colonel. They didn't take women, and they certainly didn't leave survivors." I finally spoke, my voice low, perfectly level, devoid of any stress or anger. It was the voice I used when calibrating high-power lasers, precise and deadly. "They don't take women, Captain. They take assets." Hayes turned back to me, the anger dissolving rapidly, replaced by a growing, sickening understanding. He looked at the mark again. He saw the pattern, the intentionality of the injury. He saw that the ridges were not random, but followed specific muscular lines, mapping out a crucial pressure point. It was a sign of initiation into a club that had no membership forms, only body bags. And then Rourke added the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. His words aimed at Hayes but intended for the history books. "The acid map," Rourke choked out, leaning against the wall for support. "It's the mark of those who were given the choice. Cooperate with their captors or endure. Those who received the mark, they didn't just endure, Captain. They broke the interrogators. It signifies absolute loyalty earned through absolute trauma. Only one person ever wore the map of a full operational cell deployment on her skin and lived to walk away." Rourke looked at me, not with contempt, but with the profound, unsettling deference reserved for forces of nature. "They called her the technician, Captain, because she specialized in reducing hostile infrastructure to its core components. She was the one they whispered about in classified briefs, the one the cartels put $100 million bounty on. They didn't call her Santos. Rourke swallowed hard, his eyes wide and fixed. They called her the White Death. The room was silent. Hayes didn't move. He didn't blink. He finally put the pieces together, the sparse file, the technician title, the absolute absence of any official deployment record. The way I stood, ready, coiled, waiting for the threat. He realized that the quiet woman he had just harassed about a supposed clerical error wasn't enlisted. She was detached. She wasn't just highly trained. She was a sovereign killing machine, temporarily housed in a military uniform, and he had just insulted her honor and touched the proof of her horrific past. I slowly brought my left hand up and began to rewrap the compression sleeve around the acid map. The thick black material slid over the ruined skin. The sound was soft, silencing the fear in the room as effectively as a gunshot. "Captain Hayes," I said, my voice gaining a depth that wasn't there before. "The sister I mentioned? The one ambushed in Juarez? She's my younger kin. Family is the only infrastructure Unit 88 recognizes. The cartel, in their infinite stupidity, just decided to test the structural integrity of my personal network." I finished securing the sleeve, the mark disappearing back into the professional anonymity. My eyes, which had been gray and flat during the examination, now held a dangerous cold luminosity. "My physical assessment is now complete," I stated, retrieving my file from the desk where Hayes still stood, paralyzed. "I'm formally tendering my immediate resignation from this post, effective 0 hours. I have urgent fieldwork to attend to." Hayes tried to speak, but only a small squeaking sound escaped his throat. He understood. This wasn't a resignation. This was a deployment order issued by a ghost. I looked directly at him, maintaining eye contact, making sure he understood the weight of the moment. I didn't threaten him. I didn't need to. The mark had done the job. I walked toward the exit, my boots making no sound on the sterile tile. Just before I passed through the door, I turned back toward the frozen assembly. "Tell the general," I said, looking specifically at the terrified Colonel Rourke, "that the system failed. The technician is now operational. And when the cartel asks who is coming for them, tell them it's the person who knows what it feels like to burn and is bringing the fire back." I walked out, leaving the clean, sterile silence of the room filled with the sickening realization of what they had just witnessed. If you believe respect is earned by blood and not by rank, type respect in the comments.